Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing?
Doing all right. And Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm looking forward to chatting about this one with y'all.
Yeah, today we are talking all about Halloweentown II, Kalabar's Revenge. Why did we pick this one? Because this is going to be the capper of our Halloween month here on That D Plus show for 2021, and it serves as a fitting sequel to last year when Logan and I sat down for the original Halloweentown. So look forward to Halloweentown High next year, and 2 years from now, return to Halloweentown.
Maybe not.
Assuming That D Plus show has not broken me by that point in time.
Maybe by the next year after that, there will be like a reboot of Halloweentown that we can go watch.
Halloweentown, yeah.
There'll just be a new Disney Plus, like, hey, we're bringing Halloweentown back. So real quick before we hop into to kind of the normal shtick of the show, what are you guys' history with Halloweentown 2, Kalabar's Revenge in particular? Did you watch this basically like when it originally came out when you were kids, or? This was admittedly 2001. Whenever that, puts that in your time frame.
I was 9 years old when this movie came out. I did watch it when it came out as a kid. I've seen this movie, at least 4 or 5 times, maybe more. As someone who, obviously, as we talked about last year, I love the original Halloweentown. It is like one of those movies that I think of when I think of Halloween films. This one kind of is a tandem piece, right? It is the B-side of the Halloweentown album. Is it as good? Probably not. But just as the first movie has moments that are like burned into my mind that are really just like random things, right? Like the example I gave last year was the little like scavenger hunt of them getting like the wolf's hair and like the ghost sweat. Like it's just something that is just like in the back of my brain forever. This movie too is like those moments that literally 20 years later, I still think about at least like a couple times a week. Honestly, there's like one thing in particular that we'll get to. There, like I think about it constantly. It's a fun movie. I've enjoyed it. Right, like this was like the peak of my time with Disney Channel original movies. Right. In a lot of ways, this is kind of at the tail end of like that, like 96 to like 01, 02 time frame. So I have a lot of fond memories of Halloweentown 2, despite what some haters will say in the forthcoming hour here.
Hey, hi, I'm a hater. Frank, how about you? What was your kind of history with Halloweentown?
Yeah, I'm in a lot of the same boat as Logan there, and I don't quite remember if I saw it like when it was brand new, but I definitely caught it rerunning. Like they pretty much played these every year after the fact around Halloween. And I know, kind of like Logan said, I've had to have seen like all of them at least like 5 times. It was totally just like a staple of like that time of the year, and especially for me and my family, it was definitely like these movies, especially for me and like my sister, and then like Hocus Pocus.
Yeah,
but those were like the Halloween like movies that we would always catch on TV. And so that's why like I definitely remember like enjoying these movies a lot, but in my memory they all kind of like bleed together. Like I couldn't really tell you like what was in what movie. But then in this one, like I know we'll get into I guess the thoughts on it in a little bit, but I definitely was like surprising to kind of go back and just kind of catch this one. Which is apparently, I guess, after watching it, like the Attack of the Clones of this trilogy.
Maybe
it's definitely not the worst of the trilogy of Halloweentown.
We'll see next year. So
I can assure you that
for me, we talked a little bit last year when we did the original Halloweentown that like I did not have I had gone for many, many years of thinking like, oh, I don't think I ever actually watched Halloweentown. I just don't think like, I think I was probably away from Disney Channel movies at that time, and then watched it, and like immediately a whole bunch of stuff came back. So I had seen Halloweentown, but like it didn't leave a lasting impression for me as like, oh, something like, near and dear from my childhood. But I did have a lot of those same kind of like touchstone moments of like the ghost in the sweatbox. Like I remembered that like as soon as that came up, kind of thing. This one I definitely never watched, or at least like if I did, it like nothing came back to me as I sat down and watched this one. So I imagine that will be the case for the rest of the series. So this is like my first time coming into it 20 years after the fact, and this was a very rough watch for me. Like there are a few things in there that like I was kind of like live reacting to in our Slack channel that really like stood out, and that was like because a lot of times like when I'm watching one of these, I'll watch it and then I'll do a rewatch or something where I'm going to take notes on it. And this one I was like, I am not going to rewatch this, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in some of these things so I have them to call back on if I really need to pull it from it. But yeah, this was definitely like a Disney Channel original movie, especially like even from the opening chunk where they're like admitting, hey, Halloweentown changes, and you very clearly see, oh, now they're just in like a very tiny backlot of a like a Hollywood studio or something, instead of like the original one being in like a town square or something. It's like the little courtyard that they have with the pumpkin is just like, wow, they barely put a budget into this one. Okay, what is this gonna be? And yeah, I don't think like the movie ever really recovered for me from that kind of like first impression. Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead, Logan. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's really weird. It's really interesting. Even as a kid, I've always remember thinking like, why? Like it was weird as a kid. Like it's not something like being like 29 or in our 30s and not being like, why is it on like small courtyard like backlot thing? It was weird as a kid, right? Like watching the first one, being like, it's this massive, like
it looks like it's
city plaza.
It is like it looks like it is, especially because they set up kind of this introduction of like, oh, there's a Halloween party going on. It looks like somebody decided to do a Halloweentown themed Halloween party in their backyard, and that's all the space they had for this movie.
It's really strange, and I think in some ways you're right. I think the movie doesn't fully recover from that, right? Like this movie's interesting. Frank gave the analogy of it being Attack of the Clones. In some ways it feels much more like A New Hope, in the sense of there's really like three places they're at for like the entire movie, right? Like it's very limited in terms of the settings and like places they're going to, right? Like you're at Gort's place for a lot of the film, literally just like time traveling to different spots at Gort's place.
Yeah.
You're at the family house, and then you're at like the ball, and that's pretty much it. And then you get like a brief trip to like the Cromwell's old home, and then you get like the brief like courtyard shots, and that's basically it. That's the film. I think what they do with the amount of time the movie, because the movie's only 2 minutes shorter than Halloweentown 1, but it's a weird 2 minutes shorter. It's a weird hour and 20 minutes, right? Where like the original Halloweentown, I think, has such a good pace to it, right? And like doesn't linger that long on anything, and kind of moves along at a really quick, brisk pace. And I think it works for the kind of movie and the kind of story it's telling. And I think that movie is really good. Still, right? Like I really think that movie's a lot of fun. And then I think Halloweentown 2, for me, it struggles most because it gets bogged down in errors, right? It does just spend so long in certain stretches of time. So it's somehow an hour and 20 minute long movie that could have probably shaved off 15 minutes. But at the same time, I feel like I needed like another 20 minutes of the movie to like fully like unpack all of the things they're bringing in the story. And like, we just introduced time travel and then blew right past that. And like, we didn't linger on that. And I was like, there's a lot more information about like certain things, and like way less about other shit. And like, I need like some sort of like in between space here, Halloweentown 2.
Like the fact that like, yeah, it's the ideas that get introduced of like, oh, yep, time travel is just a thing that they can do, and that like spells can just be like a word or two, and you can just kind of like accidentally say a spell or reverse a spell, but it only reverses enough for like the to move a character forward in the plot. Like theoretically, why didn't the whole house revert, or like what when they originally kind of revert Luke and stuff? It's just like what that weird. But yeah, they introduce that thing, and then they spin their wheels for a long time, not doing anything else. And then finally like land on a resolution, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Now you've got to go back to all these other parts that they need to kind of like close the loop on. Yeah, it was weird.
I think like I don't want to get like I don't know where the right place to get into this or not is on this episode, but like one, and this is a weird argument to make about a Disney Channel original movie called Halloweentown Calabar's Revenge, but one of the things watching it, a couple days ago when I did, is this movie does weird shit with like its own mythology, in terms of being like I struggled so hard to remember, like in the first movie, does just saying a spell backwards as like, I don't think that was a thing in the first movie. I couldn't remember if like you just say it backwards and it like reverses a spell. Like I don't remember that in that first movie. But here it's like a huge plot point. Like it's like a big deal here.
Yeah.
And like you said, like the one word spells and like accidentally using spells. And then like on top of that is like the weird shit of just like,
and some spells are in Welsh, and then some spells are just English, and some spells
English, right? Like, and like the problem for me too, like it's what we talk about a lot in like games, where like they ignored their own rules they set. And we talked about this a lot in like Star Wars when we did that on D+, but it's just like they would establish rules or take rules from the first movie and then be like, you know what though? Forget about that. Like, look, at midnight it's gonna close. It's just gonna close, and then like it closed, but we made it, so fuck it. Like we're gonna do it like
exactly. But we have magic, so magic can do anything, and that's
and then
pretty
like
much...
I would have been less upset about that if they'd still like used like the Walking Dead zombie heads and been like, here's what we're gonna say, but instead like they just knew what to say at exactly the same time across dimensions, and it was like a fucking like 3 paragraphs of shit, and I was just like, what are we doing right now? Like what? Like it's just like such bizarre stuff like that I was like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah. Well, before we dive more into the movie's specifics and what we thought about it, let's do a little bit of the history lesson here. This was originally released October 12th, 2001, which, like, looking at that, I was like, ooh, that is a time to have released a movie in America. Other releases of that era, you had Zoolander had come out September 28th.
One of my very favorite comedies.
Serendipity came out October 5th, one of my very favorite rom-coms. Corky Romano came out October 12th as well.
That's a
which
deep cut.
I was just like, oh, that's right. Whatever happened to Chris Kattan? And then like you look at what happened to Chris Kattan, and it's actually a very sad story because he had some like serious like neck and like injuries out of SNL and stuff, and he just never really like recovered well from that. And it's like, oh, that sucks. We also had Mulholland Drive came out October 12th. Shout out to David Lynch. Donnie Darko on October 26th. Amelie came out November 2nd. On the the Disney proper side of things, you had Monsters Inc. came out November 2nd as movie. Well. Ocean's 11 came out November 7th.
That's a great movie.
Harry Potter and the Philosopher's / Sorcerer's Stone came out November 16th. So very like wildly different levels of quality of like witchcraft. Between just a month a month apart, really.
Some would argue that this movie is better. I don't know who they are, but someone might argue that.
I mean, it wouldn't be Logan, because Logan really likes the Harry Potter stuff. So
I do.
This was also Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring came out around this time, December 19th. And then that year's Best Picture winner, A Beautiful Mind, came out December 21st. As Logan kind of alluded to, this has a fortunately very brisk runtime of 1 hour and 21 minutes. And in the Disney Channel original movie timeline of things, this came out following The Poof Point, September 14th, 2001, an even better time to have released a movie. especially a Disney Channel original movie. Any guesses on what Poof Point is about or who's in it?
I don't remember it at all. No.
Yeah, same.
So
Is it about like soccer or something?
No, it has nothing. Nothing sports wise. So I looked it
Okay.
up. The Poof Point, starring Taj Mowry, the
Oh.
younger brother of Tia and Tamara.
Yeah.
And the premise is basically it's like a Honey I Shrunk the Kids pseudo kind of story, but instead of like shrinking, the parents are scientists and their like machine goes wrong and accidentally fires on them, and the machine reverts people back in time. And if they go too far back in time, they will go to the Poof Point where they like stop existing. And so it's Taj Mowry trying to like save his parents as they revert and get younger. And there's like a sequence where they're basically like, oh, the same age, and he like gets a newfound appreciation for his parents because he now knows like that he was just like them, or they were just like him at their age, and kind of thing. So
Don't
yeah,
remember that at all.
yeah. And then "'Twas the Night" was the follow up to Kalabar's Revenge here, that came out December 7th, 2001. And I have already completely forgotten what that one was about. Let me.
I think this one is basically just the Santa Claus. Like, it is literally
Yes. Oh,
just the
that's right,
plot
yes.
of Tim Allen's The Santa Claus.
Pretty much, with Bryan Cranston in there as kind of the like a young Bryan Cranston, probably pre Malcolm in the Middle, maybe around the time of Malcolm in the Middle.
Right as Malcolm in the Middle would have started, right? Like,
Yeah, he's kind of the like, if you look at the picture, he is like in the Santa suit and stuff, and they're all in the sleigh. So yeah, it was. A troubled and irresponsible man named Nick Wrigley, Bryan Cranston, is hacked by criminals who are looking for a bank account code to Nick's boss, and it waylays into Christmas hijinks from there. The roll call here. The director is Mary Lambert, who admittedly has a very like impressive bit of credentials. Her early career, much like a Mick G, featured a lot of music video work, including iconic videos like Madonna's "Like a Virgin," "Material Girl," and "Like a Prayer." She also did, believe, Janet Jackson's "Nasty."
Ooh,
But then
great music video.
on the like proper movie side of things, she also did Pet Sematary and Pet Sematary 2 back in the 80s and early 90s. So she's not, she was not averse to horror. And admittedly, like one of the, I don't know if it was a trivia bit or if it was just like in a review of Halloweentown 2, somebody commented like, this really has a much darker tone than the rest of the movies in the Halloweentown universe or whatever. And I wonder if they were, reacting to Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary background. The writers here, John Cooksey and Ali Marie Matheson, they wrote the original Halloweentown as well. They're basically a writing duo that I basically just pulled this from last year's doc, because they had also done a handful of episodes of Rugrats, as well as a Canadian sci-fi show called The Collector. And they were it. The original also featured Paul Birnbaum, and he is still credited on here as like based on characters created by, but he was not involved in the making of Halloweentown 2. But he had been a writer for the A-Team as well as 21 Jump Street, those TV shows, and then later would go on to write the movie Hollywoodland, where Ben Affleck had played a young George Reeves. In the starring section, we have returning, basically the core family here returning. Kimberly J. Brown as Marnie, who had done the show, I believe it was, Tumbleweeds, as well as Halloweentown 2, or Halloweentown, of course, before this. And then she was also in Bringing Down the House, and then she will continue on into Halloweentown High. Judith Hoag as Gwen here was the original April O'Neil in the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, but not brought back for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. We talked about that last time. She's also in Armageddon. And then she too will return in Halloweentown High, as well as Return to Halloweentown. And then she would go on to be in the series Nashville. Joey Zimmerman, pretty much as Dylan, pretty much just in the Halloweentown movies. Not much else in his repertoire. Emily Reski, like I was actually impressed that they brought her back, because so often, like, oh, we have like the precocious little girl, and then that gets recast in like the sequels and stuff like that. But no, it's the same girl from the first one. She'd also done Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain.
Hell yeah, she did.
Prior
Hollywood
to this.
Hogan.
Yep. And and then she will once again return in Halloweentown High. Also returning, we have Philip Van Dijk as Luke, who I remember calling out last year. He was in that terrible Fantastic Four movie from 1994 that was basically just like trying to save the license for Fox, where he played a very young Johnny Storm. And then he is one of 5 actors to have played Arnold in Hey Arnold. And then he did a little bit of TV work in 2003, but has not done a lot since. And then lastly, on the returning front, we have Debbie Reynolds as Aggie, of course, who notable from her long career in theater as well as films, including Singing in the Rain, The Unsinkable Molly Brown, The Debbie Reynolds Show. She was Charlotte in the 1970s Charlotte's Web, and then she was also in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer of the Bank and Rass, I believe, variety. 3 new faces for you on this one. Daniel Kuntz playing Cal. Is in a handful of miscellaneous TV credits before and after this, and he was also worth mentioning for us. He was in L.A. Noire. He's a named character in L.A. Noire. So I should
play L.A. Noire.
I presume somebody that like you interrogate at some point in one of those one of those scenes. You also have Blue Mankuma playing Gort. He has credits going all the way back to 1979. Notably, he was in the RoboCop TV series, which I did not even know was a thing, and then would continue playing that same character into RoboCop 4, which I also did not know was a thing. I have no idea who he is, but he has a credit for Beetle Adventure Racing, which is one of my favorite deep cut N64 games. So shout out to that. He's also in the series Sonic Underground. And he is also in the Santa Claus 2 and the movie 2012. Presumably, since I believe we'll be doing the Santa Claus 2 as part of our Christmas month or our holidays month later.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We will see him again in a couple months. And then lastly, we have as Alex Peter Wingfield. Numerous miscellaneous credits before this, including the Highlander TV series, as well as various other Highlander adjacent projects. Basically, he's one of them Highlanders, and was in many of those things. He was also in Day 7 of the series 24, as well as Caprica, the Battlestar Galactica spin-off. A little bit of trivia. The Sanderson sisters' costumes from Hocus Pocus are recycled in this film and can be seen on 3 new actresses at the end of the film when the gray spell is broken. I did see at least 2 of them, so I'll take this trivia's credit, word for it. But yeah, I did not see all 3, and they're clearly not playing like the Sanderson sisters. They're just witches in the Sanderson sister outfits. Debbie Reynolds, Judith Hoag, and Joey Zimmerman are the only individuals to appear in all 4 Halloweentown films, as we touched on last year as well. It's just in here it's in here as trivia rather than like a film review. But yes, this film had much darker tone than the rest in the series.
A little suspect. But
yeah,
I'll allow it.
It's IMDb. Anybody who has an IMDb account can just kind of put trivia in there. But I was like, all right, I'll put that in there just because it was slim pickings. There's like one trivia in there that I was like, this is a very weird thing to be in here as trivia, but it's basically like that. It's suggesting that Marnie and Cal, those actors, are together in real life as of like 2018, but then it's like. But, it's hard to tell because they're very private in their social media or whatever. It's like, then don't be a creeper, dude. This is weird. Lastly, though, when Gwen turns into a monster, it was actually Judith Hoag herself in makeup playing it and not a stunt person or stand-in. So shout out to her having an extra day in the makeup chair and on set.
One thing that I think is a kind of it's trivia, I guess, but it's like a fun thing that I always think about in the movie every time I've watched it is the mask that Cal gives to Gwen whenever she turns into the monster, she looks similar to Kalabar when he's like in his monsterish form from the first movie. So I was in my headcanon, I was like, he did it like deliberately as like a way to like kind of like evoke like the monster that they viewed his dad as. It's always like the cool headcanon I give, because they look pretty similar, I think.
There's another piece of trivia that I did not pull in here because I just don't know the reference, but there is a reference in here saying the witch's mask worn by Judith Hoag gives a nod to the witch's mask in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch from Sylvia
Yeah.
Shepard. So it's also a nod to that. So yeah, okay. Diving back into does it hold up and what do we think and favorite moments and stuff. I want to kick this off with, of course, a quote from Logan's partner Shravya, who after being forced to watch this with Logan, and I apologize to her, said, quote, "This movie was bad. There were so many different climaxes to the movie. It made no sense, and it could have ended approximately 9 times."
I want you to know that I'm really glad that it was really funny getting because I think all 3 of us watched the movie on the same night. Actually, it was really weird. And so you were probably about 25 minutes ahead of us, Trevor. And so you get to the countdown thing, and then we got there too. And like, out of her review, there's a good another like 6 paragraphs that are just her going on about the countdown. That was her visceral dislike of a 60-second countdown in a movie.
All right, count it down with me. 60, 59, 58, 57. I was like, wow, they're really doing this. And then like I almost went back to watch just that sequence to just total up, here are the numbers they don't actually include in the countdown. But because they just stick with it so much. And like they definitely have a lot of like time jumps because you leave that and you go to Halloweentown or whatever, and so you spend some time there while theoretically the countdown is still happening or whatever. But it's just like, wow, that is like Austin Powers level of like ridiculous parody of like, yep, we're just gonna fully count down from 60 because that's a thing that normal people do.
You had posted about that in the Slack, and then when I got to that same thing, I had to like post a message where I'm like, oh god, I got to the countdown, and I still, even after you had posted about it, I still had the same reaction where I'm like, wow, they're really just going from 60. Like he wasn't kidding. Like
yeah, it was so yes. My notes, as I put in the Slack, watching Halloweentown 2, Marnie continues to be real dumb, was the first one that I had in there. I do appreciate Gort doing the like, you know, I'm playing the most bland character I can be, so I'm going to do the like stereotypical black person, like using a white, like a very nerdy, nasally white man's voice, which I likened to Sorry to Bother You, but then you also have like, you know, Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor comedians been doing that, you know, that kind of
Dave Chappelle
bit for decades.
On the Chappelle Show.
Exactly. It is very much like Dave Chappelle when he would be dressed up as a white man kind of thing. It's absolutely that kind of character. So I appreciated like the minor social commentary that he's doing with that little bit. Logan tried to argue that Marnie is great, and I said no, she's repeatedly terrible. Sophie is the one who's actually understanding all this stuff, and just like yeah, she's the precocious, you know, young one, but like she actually gets it, and she like deduces all these things. It was also I didn't put this in there, but like the first scene that like that Cal and the dad show up or whatever, I'm like, there's definitely something fishy about this dad. Like the whole like, here, I brought 2 gallons of green stuff because green's my favorite color. Green. I was like, when we come back to them and he's like flirting with the mom, I'm like, this guy's got to be like, you know, he's like a cursed frog or something like that. It's going to be like a reverse Prince kind of situation. And then like the very next scene, like there's like a frog that's left behind as he kind of disappears. I was like, well, I was kind of right. So that was like very kind of like telegraphed almost.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think then my last little comment was bold move to do a full countdown from 60 at this
Mhm.
party. And then, well, it was short at least. So yeah, those were those are like the the things that that stood out to me. The one that I actually like is the Gort thing. I like that
Mhm.
actor. I like the character of Gort. And everything else, I very much was like, oh my god, this movie is bad. This is a movie that would be fun to watch a la like we did with Brick or something like that, like as a group and watch it
It'd be
and just
so good, yeah.
make fun of it. This is a very much like a mystery science theater kind of movie for me. But yeah, if I never have to watch this again, I will be so happy. And I am immediately dreading having to come back to the next two Halloweentown movies
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah.
Maybe I'll just like screw it next year. We're just doing both of them just so we can knock them out and not have to ever think about
No,
Halloweentown again.
you don't want to do that. It's
Oh, I mean, I
um,
don't want to, but it's ripping the Band-Aid off at this point.
I think so. I mean, you definitely dislike the movie more than I do, right?
Of
And
course,
I
yeah.
would probably wager to say that I like it the most of the three of us. I think the movie is flawed. I mean, certainly from my memory, I still think this is the second best Halloweentown movie. I think three is probably a little bit worse than this. They're very different. Is a problem too. Like each movie is kind of a different, its own thing. But like
Real quick, I do
like,
want to jump in though because one that I didn't actually like put down there, but it's something I just regularly think about, especially like it's called Calabar's Revenge. It is not Calabar's Revenge at all. like
no,
I mean in the incredibly loosest sense of Cal being like this heretofore unknown son of Calabar coming back. But yeah, the fact that the thing, one of the redeeming elements of the first one for me is Calabar and that
mhm,
actor's performance was like fun and
yeah.
he brought a lot of charisma to it, and he's just not here, but they're definitely trying to like bait and switch you on it, and the fact that he's credited in the movie, and like he's credited because he's just in like a flashback scene from like here's what Calabar was like last time. And that's how I know that the rose should have been a clue or whatever. But yeah, that like the fact that it's called Calabar's
Yeah.
Revenge, I'm like, that's a terrible subtitle for this movie.
I think it's interesting because Calabar, like you said, is such a charismatic presence on screen, right? Like he just like that actor just commands, I think, your attention because he's given such a like larger than life persona. Like he just felt like he had so much fun, and like so much room to work with in that role. And then Cal is sort of playing the opposite of that, right? Like he's playing a very like straight laced, like not loud, boisterous, like outsized person. Like he's playing someone very much about the books and kind of bland. He's literally a wall at one point in time, and you can barely tell the like difference in his personality.
Multiple points in time.
Yeah, right. And
yeah.
so I just think it's such an interesting decision to kind of have him not play it like Calabar. I don't know, like I think this movie's really interesting to watch in a lot of ways, right? Like I bet you they could do a really fun like Polygon style like oral history of this movie because like it just seems like so many different parts sort of smashed together, right? Like I really like the Gort stuff. And to like the point I referenced earlier, I think literally probably like multiple times a week about Gort whenever I lose anything. It is still where I envision things that a lost go to is Gort, right? Like that's just like where they go. This dude is hoarding them. And so, that is like one of those like weird things you hear as a kid that just like sticks with you. Just like the Osmosis Jones and like taking medicine and like that's how it works. And so I think that like, Halloween
I'm immediately glad Osmosis Jones is not on Disney Plus because Logan would somehow get me to watch that movie.
Osmosis Jones. I love Osmosis Jones.
It's fun.
Osmosis Jones fun fact. Now this is Osmosis Jones podcast because it's a better movie. Whenever I told this to Renee. Whenever I like go to sleep,
also 2001, so right around this time.
Yeah. Whenever I go to sleep on a given week, probably 2 to 3 times a week. When I go to sleep, I envision going to sleep like my body is like populated by like Osmosis Jones people. And so like they're all like flipping the switches, like make me go to bed and like turn the power off in the city, and like everyone's like driving home on their commute kind of thing. And I find it very soothing, and then I just like fall asleep. So like the people in like the control, I'm just like shutting me off. But Halloweentown 2 is not like that. But it does have Gort, and he's a great character. I love his performance both as the like angry Gort and also as the like I'm a nerdy Gort.
Let's match socks that aren't going to be matched.
Yeah, and like that was a really funny bit of like
and
they're never gonna
the
match.
joke
Right? Like,
we're going to come back to 4 times.
And like I don't know, it was funny, right? And like I think he gets one of the better laughs when Marnie discovers that she can like switch him back and forth and like does it like a few different times, and he just like has to keep changing personalities and be like, stop this, like this is not, I don't like this, right? Like I think those moments worked for me.
Or not even that, but like the like when she's testing out other spells, and like one of them is a cutaway, and like a troll, a gnome doll shows up, and he's like, "Stop trying that one." That was a good moment.
Because it's like 15 one.
Because there's like 4 of them. Stop saying that one. It's like,
and like
clearly
know,
it isn't the thing. Yeah.
I think I would have like loved to see more of Gort in the movie. If anything, like I think his like second act part of the film is probably the best part of the movie. I think it's a really weird movie. I think the Halloween party at the beginning of it is sort of strange. I think the fact that like they like leave the Halloween party and then like the school party, it starts at like 11 o'clock, I guess. Like it has to start so late, like,
yeah,
and then go for so long. Like it's just like a weird school system here. The idea that like the mom would be like, I can't bring my daughter who's like 8 to a school dance because there'd be too many other kids there, I guess. I don't know. Like, that was like a weird thing. And then for her not to think to give it to Dylan, be like, oh, Dylan, you can just stay and babysitter. Like, that didn't cross her mind. It was like a weird thing as well. I don't know. I mean, like, it's sort of a hodgepodge of a film.
Yeah. Frank, any thoughts from you you want to add there?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what's already been said there. And one of the things I did realize and kind of think about, especially when you were saying the title when we started the podcast, is I was like, yeah, it's not really Kalabar's revenge, is it? Like, and one of the things that I think probably could have even made the movie stronger is if they just made it his revenge, like if he came back, or like if they like it just did like.
Yeah, I kept waiting for like him to come back, like, or like somehow Cal wasn't his son. It was like he was Kalabar in disguise or something like that. And then that just never happens. And I was like, I feel like that had to have been like an earlier version of the script or whatever. And maybe they went to was it Robin? It's not Robin Leach, Robin Wright, Robin Thomas, who played Kalabar. Maybe they went to him and he was just like, no, I don't want to, I'm not going to come back and do that. And so maybe they just couldn't get him. And that's why it ends up being what this is. But yeah, I was just like, what?
Because I was totally with you where I was like, if anything, just steal the Horcrux thing, and if it's like a young Kalabar that's like pissed off about what happened, like, sure. But yeah, and then if anything, you're probably right, where I wonder if they did try to get him, and I wonder if like with all the budget cuts, he was just like, no, I'm not going to take no money to do this random movie for Disney Channel. But yeah, like I also, to Logan's point there, and even I get some of your point there too, Trevor, I did really love the stuff with Gort. That was like my favorite part of the movie. And I think it is funny where it's like, you could have just made this movie like a Halloweentown 2 Gort's Adventure. And it would have just been like a better movie.
I've been totally here for it.
Yeah. There was also, you also have the Benny, the cab driver, like obviously one of the other iconic like characters from the first one. And like in gray version, he's just very, very slow. And okay, I get the joke. And you're not doing anything new with the joke, so let's move on to a different thing. But nope, we keep coming back to him too. And I was just like, oh man, there's a lot of like rough stuff there. But yeah, when they introduce this whole idea of like time travel or something, it's like, oh, okay, well maybe then we'll go back and see like a young Kalabar or something like that. Nope, they're like, that doesn't happen either. It's just like, why? And if time travel exists in this universe, like, why didn't Cal just like time travel back and do other weird things and stuff? Like, oh man,
because it had been lost in Gort's closet. That's why he didn't know it existed.
Yeah, well, but like it was lost, but it was lost so long ago that Gort sold it to Kalabar decades
50 years
before the
ago.
first movie or whatever. Yeah, and so like I at least I appreciated that element of it, just being like, oh, okay, so like he already had the one book, and he just he somehow knew that there was a second copy of it and needed to get that copy. Okay, like at least solid motivation there. And again, that's why Marnie's a freaking idiot, because she's introducing somebody who she just met. She has no idea he's connected to the magical world, even though like we as the audience can pretty clearly pick that up. But like she just introduces this boy into the magic world, and he of course gets the magic book and stuff like that, and then she's like aghast when like, no, it couldn't have been him. He's the only person that would have been in here, because like only 3 of us know how to get into this hidden room. But oh my god, I hate that character, and I don't understand I mean, like, I got to imagine your love of Marnie is just like, a holdover from 9-year-old crush Logan or something like that.
It's interesting because I think that it's such a weird sequence. Like, for her to even invite him in is such like a weird thought process, and then for her to not like the whole sequence around like the spell book was weird, right? Like, because he was just like, oh, is that a like, potion book basically? And she's like, oh yeah, it is. And he's like, oh, let's go look at it. And she immediately is like, oh no, like, why would like, and then it's like has like such a weird reaction to that. And then he had like this whole thing like, oh, I just want to like look at it. And she's like, you can't touch it. And I was like, in my head, I was like, was there something from the first movie about not being able to like touch another like witches or warlocks spell book? Or was it like a weird thing? Because she was like, so like, just don't touch it at all. And I was like, is that a thing? And then nope, he like grabs it and is like fine. Like they use it again at the end of the movie, and I was like, oh, just like don't touch it, I guess, to take it, but like in a weird way. And then yeah, like it is strange her relationship with Cal, because like by the time they get back to Halloweentown and they're like, oh, like Cal took it, right? And she's like, he would never, he was so nice. You have to like think back and be like, well, they actually hung out for like 5 minutes together basically, and that's all that they had done. And then he left and they immediately came to Halloweentown basically. So like you really haven't known him. Like he asked you for a date, that was nice, I guess, but like otherwise it's been pretty chill. And so again, when she gets to be like, he gave me a rose, I should have known, it's like, that's a fairly nondescript thing to do, I will acknowledge. Like, I hope you don't just like in the future aren't being like, he gave me a rose, he must be another one of Kalabar's sons.
That ends up being like a traumatic trigger for her anytime she gets a rose. She's like,
okay.
oh no!
Like, yeah, it's like it's an alright thing to just give someone a rose. Like, it's not necessarily evil or diabolical. But like that whole dynamic is weird. Like I do have to say on this podcast that Cal's face coming out of the block in Halloweentown remains one of the creepier things I've seen. It's just like so unnervingly like uncanny. Like I've never liked it. As a kid, it freaked the fuck out of me. And then like even now watching, I was just like, this is just I don't like his like face, and it's very emotionless because that's just how he's acting. And it's just like, I don't like the like that is the scariest part of this movie. Is like that face. I mean, out of the block.
I mean, even that it strikes me as like, because obviously it's like CG and stuff, and I feel like he just couldn't be too animated because it wouldn't work. It's in the same way that like, it reminds me of, and this is a deep cut that ties into the Muppets Haunted Mansion thing we did, I guess. But Madame Leota, who's like in the crystal ball in the Haunted Mansion ride, like. In the history of that ride, like behind the scene footage of that ride, like she is basically like plastered into a box because she could only be in like that very specific area, or it would have like messed up with the projection and stuff like that. And so it struck me as one of those kinds of things of like, he was probably sitting there with like, a wall kind of facade cut around his face or something to act a la like a green screen thing, and he just couldn't go anywhere, do anything with that, and be too animated about it because it would have messed up the what they were doing with that. But yeah, it's I mean, it's definitely like weird, and it is that like early 2000s CG.
Yeah.
So
I'm also curious too, like what y'all's thoughts are, because it is like, around like the middle part of the movie, basically he like reveals like, oh, like I can listen anywhere except for like the Cromwell home, apparently. And then he uses that like in really dramatic ways at times. Like he like stops time and like catches her to be like, oh, like you use this trick, I know it now. And then like never does anything with that ever again. And it's like, yo, this dude was like stop someone like mid time travel and like grab him from like the fucking Matrix room. Like he's like the architect, which just seems like an incredibly powerful thing to do. And then was just like, but I'm just gonna let you keep doing it and like just bounce. And it's like, that seems like a power that you should like use more. Like when he's like, instead he's just like mocking him from like his voice from afar, being like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Nice try. And it's like, his powers were weirdly used in the film. And I never quite understood what was going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, that's what I alluded to earlier. Like the continuity and the like the writing of this movie just, I don't think is good. And it is very much like, we need to get to the next thing. And so, like, we're going to have her accidentally stumble upon the spell, which Luke is going to somehow remember word for word, pretty much, and be able to, like, help dictate and figure out and reverse engineer the, like, reversal of the trap, instead of, we need something, you know, a trap, blah, blah, whatever, like that whole thing. And it's just like, why was that important? Oh my God. But it only undoes him. It doesn't undo the rest of the house for reasons, for no reason whatsoever. And yeah, just and when she says it and stumbles into it as they're dictating it, it doesn't undo anything. And then she has to say it as if it's a spell. It's like, no, because she wasn't saying as if it was a spell earlier in the movie either. Like, it goes to what you're kind of talking about. Like they don't even come close to like abiding by the rules that they're trying to set up in the Halloweentown universe. It's just like, hey, we need to get through point A, point B, point C, point Z, all the way to Z, and it's just like, we're just gonna do it regardless of if that makes sense or not. Frank,
to your point there too, I love how like adamant he is, like when he's like transcribing what she said, and he's like, no, that's not what you said.
You
I
didn't
didn't
say
know
that. You didn't say a charm or whatever. It's like, okay. But at that point, it's also like they also go like well past the part that they needed to identify, and it's just like, so why did we continue on in that line of thinking if like, oh, look here, because they're like, if you look at that like paper, there's like a couple things where it's like, oh, it could be this too. And so maybe at some point it was a longer thing that they just accidentally stumbled upon. And then they were like, that's going to be way too confusing for Disney kids. Let's just like make it simple and just like make it only Trappa. That's all you got to worry about. It's just like, so the spell to turn everything gray is a part. That's it. Like so nobody in the history of Halloweentown ever said apart. I imagine if we go back and watch,
wasn't a wizard, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I imagine if you go back and watch the first Halloweentown movie, you're gonna find some things that should have turned Halloweentown gray, because it's such an incredibly simple spell that can just completely upend their universe.
Yeah,
but at least it can also be reversed as simply.
It's also interesting because they never fully explain, like, diving into the spell more, they never fully explain its effects or progression, right? Yeah. Like, for some characters, it moves at pretty quick speed, like when they meet Astrid, right? And then for, like, Luke, it moves at a slower pace. And then for, like, you know, the Grand Old Debbie Reynolds, it moves at, like, a way quicker pace. Like, she, like, gets it and then is, like, done in, like, 2 minutes, basically, right? And whereas with like Astrid, she was like, "Oh, I'm sad now, but like I'm still like cognitive, right?" And like Luke is like, "Oh, like I'm like kind of a jerk, but like I can still speak." Aggie's just gone.
Look, I've still got like, this orange on my jacket or whatever.
Yeah, and like it's very clear in the case of Agate, they were like, "Oh, like we have to just like sideline the most powerful character movie for the rest of this movie because otherwise she'll just solve it." Mm-hmm. And so like, let's just like push her to the side by being like, she got it randomly. Marnie didn't. Don't worry about that. Even though she's been here the exact same length of time, we just need to get rid of Aggie so that she doesn't solve it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that they did in the first movie, But the first movie, it was done better, right? And like the first movie, she got like, her and Calabar had their whole conflict, and like the mom, and like it was done partially to get like rid of these two strong characters, but also in a way that made sense. And here's just like, we just need to get rid of her again because she's too strong of a wizard. So boom.
And they just do it in the laziest way. Like they could, I mean, like another lazy way that they could have done it, but at least it would have like made sense in the plot and kind of like addressed that issue of like, yeah, Marty's been here just as long, would have been if like Cal showed up, whispered in her ear at something so we don't hear what he says, but like that triggers the spell, and suddenly she's in the gray or whatever. And like you at least could have done something like that, but no, they don't do that. It just is there's just a lot of things that I was just like, this is Disney Channel original movie levels of like quality, really. And it's just like, oh yeah, this probably would have been fine if I was like 7 or 8, but not as a 36-year-old man like watching it. And I'm not as forgiving as I would have been once upon a time. Any final
I definitely
thoughts? Go ahead, Frank.
I definitely get those vibes at the ending scene, like the party at the school. Like because like 1 or 2 people's costumes are like really expensive and nice looking, and a bunch of other people's costumes are totally like people that actually just showed up to a school costume party that they were like filming.
Yeah.
So I thought like that, but especially the way it's like shot and everything, I definitely got those low budget vibes, and I was like, man, I definitely don't remember it looking like this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to spend so much time talking about the ending, right? Like I could do a podcast just on like that, and it's such a bizarre. There's so much shit happening in like the final end dance sequence, right? Where like the monster mash happens, right? And like everyone's like mask becomes like their fucking monster thing. And like when that happens, it's like sort of cool to be like, all right, cool. Like all the monsters are coming alive. But then they like open the portal and like they just like stop freaking out because they very much haven't been cured yet, but they just decided to be like, oh, we're just going to be like not monsters for a minute and like watch this whole fight play out, like just like ring around them kind of thing. And I was like, and like for a moment I was like, are they cured? And then they make a point to be like, nope, we're going to do it now kind of thing. And it's like, oh, so they just like didn't bother to care about that at all for this.
Yeah.
And then the fact that like I'd completely forgotten, Cal just leaves.
Yep.
Like he just like bounces, and I was like, oh, like that. There was no sort of resolution to that ending. Like they have this whole weird like, I'm a tentacle monster hand now. You're Jesus Christ with like the bright light coming from you. I didn't remember that at all in the movie either. And then she's like, Jesus is away the vines and grabs the book, and he's like, peace out, guys, and leaves. And I was like, what did this like? Yeah, the movie just has no sort of.
I'm not afraid of you, and then like as timidly as possible, showing very much that she is absolutely afraid of this, goes in and grabs the book, and I'm just like, oh my god,
it was such a weird sequence, and like
yeah. You did remind me. I do want to give a shout out to the music in the movie. Like you said something about the Monster Mash, like. The background music that like just kind of plays on stereos and stuff, like it gave me vibes of like the whole time I was like, we're not focusing on it enough that it becomes like a showpiece, but it's like in your face enough that it's not just generic background music. And so I kept thinking like, am I going to find like a little bit of trivia that like, oh, this is actually like camp rock music or something that they like, cross promoted into the different Disney Channel movies? No, not at all. Nothing like that. It's just generic. Like they didn't want to, pay for, bigger licensed music or whatever. So they, found somebody who had like, rock Halloween kind of theme music. But like the music's actually like good and has like a good beat to it and stuff. But it's just a weird like, it kind of gets a spotlight, but not. And you never know what are they actually trying to like. Should I be focusing on the lyrics of the music? No, and especially because like they don't give you the subtitles of the music if you're watching with subtitles or whatever. But it's just like it's so there that it becomes apparent, but then they never do anything with it. And so I was like, but I did like the music at least. I was like, these tracks are actually pretty good. Like the few that you get. And then, there's like a good song at the dance before things start going crazy at the dance. But yeah, I did want to give a shout out to that at least. Frank.
I do agree with you there because I did like some of the music there, and it would have been cool though, especially with the vibe they have, if they did end up making like a theme song for the movie. Because like the aforementioned that we talked about, like Halloween 3 actually has like a theme song that's in the movie that's selling those masks that the mask is like referencing. And I'm like, but that's like so synonymous with that movie. And that's like one thing I definitely think of for that movie. And I'm like, that would have been cool to get with like Halloweentown. But I mean, obviously it's a Disney Channel movie, but like that would have been something that's really cool and could have even like elevated the movie a little bit.
I mean, like, I think they very easily could have done that. Like, obviously, a ton of Disney Channel movies have music involved. Like, I mean, think of like Xenon and the girl of the 21st century or whatever. Like, zoom, zoom, zoom.
Zoom, zoom.
And again, like Camp Rock, Cheetah Girls was a thing. I remember. Like, this was very much from the era where they were doing that pretty regularly. So it's weird that they don't do like a Halloween centric song or like or like, oh, here's the band that's playing this, and now we're going to hand it over to the MC or something like that. And it would have just been like, oh, here's some Disney Channel stars, and it's a music video that also plays, during Halloween or during October on Disney Channel for, the years to come or whatever. But no, nope, it's just kind of like there. They kind of commit to the idea of like music and then pull back. In a way that just it felt very weird. I was very confused by it, but yeah, that the ending absolutely weird though. Everybody has these very convenient masks because that's how people show up to Halloween parties. Like everybody just has a mask. Like if you showed up and didn't have a mask, and like some of them, obviously, like I mean the fact that Dylan doesn't turn into like a mariachi person or whatever wearing the sombrero outfit.
No mask though, so yeah, he gets away with it.
Apparently.
But there was totally people like in the crowd not wearing masks.
The girl who's a vampire, she doesn't have a mask. She has the teeth, but she turns into a vampire. So yeah, I was like, oh, also shout out to that girl, who is another one in the trivia that's like, oh, this was so-and-so's first role. Jessica Lucas is like, this is Jessica Lucas's first role. And I was like, oh, that must mean she actually has done other things since then. And she did a fair amount. Like she was in Melrose Place. She was in the more recent, she's in Evil Dead in 2013. And the biggest one in her credits that I did not pull in here, because I mean she's like just a small enough character in here, but shout out to her. She was Tabitha Gallivan in the Gotham series, and like was that character in 67 episodes of that series. So and I watched it long enough to get to that character, and I was like, oh yeah, that is her. Okay. But yeah, like even that just, I mean, yeah, the ending just makes so much no sense. From like, okay, oh, like we opened the portal and we have 50 seconds left to get through, but you can't get through at that point because the door's closing too much. It's like, or you could have just ran through there, but nope, we've got to extend this out another 50 seconds and then come up with this idea that, hey, actually we have magic, so we can just create a new portal.
It's also sort of a bullshit timeline, right? Like if the portal closes at midnight, but actually it closes a minute early, it doesn't close at midnight, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
It's also that thing of like, why not just have it like not be able to be accessed at midnight instead of like slowly closing? So really, if you're trying to get back in or leave in the last like minute, you're just fucked. Like that's a weird design feature to build into your portal. To say nothing of the fact that like one of the things that really bugged me watching it when I did this weekend is Gwen is there with Cal's frog dad, and then Sophie and Dylan show up and are like, yo, he's a frog, I think. And like Cal is bad. He's Kalabar's son. And she's like, oh shit, is he really? And yeah, dad's a frog, great. And then, they're like, we have to like go find Cal. He's got to be here somewhere. You two go over here. I'm going to put the mask on that Cal's dad, who's a frog, gave me, because that's not going to be somehow related to something bad. Put it on my face and go look from that way because he won't notice me. It's like, no, his dad, who he controls, gave you that mask. He probably won't know who it is. And sure enough, it was all part of his plan and his thing. And I just like, and then she like literally took it off at one point, talked to someone, and then put it back on again. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, and then like she finally like took it off for good, and he like snapped it back on her face, and it's like, yeah, you were dumb. I don't feel bad for you at all. Like he gave you 3 chances not to wear that mask, and you somehow just kept putting it back on your head, and it's like, nah, like that is such a insane idea for like a 40-year-old former witch to be like, yeah, this mask isn't haunted from this golem of a person.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that the first time, I don't know if anyone's caught this either, but I caught it and it bugged me. Dylan said golem and Dylan's mom said Gollum, but when Sophie said Gollum, she did not pronounce it right, and they just like let it fly. Like she pronounced it really weird, and I was like, "What?" She was like Golem or something like that, and I was like, "That's not right." And like no one said, "Should we do another take on that? Maybe just to have her get." And like Dylan immediately says it right too, like and like the next sentence after she says it, and I'm just like, they had it right there. Like they just cut. Here's how you say it. Take 2. Like.
Yeah.
It was such a weird thing.
I admittedly, like, that didn't bother me because I grew up probably saying golem from like seeing that as a video game enemy and stuff. So it didn't even register for me, but I'm like, yeah, that checks out. that sounds exactly like what would have happened here.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we're not gonna give like that kid a line note on a pronunciation to match the other characters. What were you gonna say, Frank?
Playing up that same scene, I did really like how they reveal that he is the golem though. And the like I like that she like conjures that fly up and he just immediately like is so enamored and then like he has to like eat it. And I did like that. And I think that is like a funny moment. That is like one of the funnier moments of the movie, especially because like she doesn't really believe them and she's like, you're just trying to disrupt my time. And then he's like, that is what totally, she's like I forget his name, but she's like trying to get his attention.
Alex,
he's just like, yeah. He just won't like pay attention. He's just too enamored by this stupid fly.
Yeah.
It also reinforces that Sophie's the best character in the movie.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's funny. Like Gord and Alex the Frogman are like the 2 most fun characters of the film. Like it's just like I feel like had a lot of fun with their roles, and it is such a it's such a weird idea to be like, let's just make a character full of frogs. Let's just make a frogman as a character and like not have it be just like a dad who's been brainwashed with a spell. Obviously, that'd be too simple. Let's make him into like an actual frog and he turns it in like all this stuff. And like, it's such a weird sequence because again, it goes back into how like Marnie was like, it could never be Cal. I've known him for 5 minutes. And the mom's like, my own children saying he's not real. Come on now. I've known him for at least an hour and a half now. Like, how could you possibly say that, right? Like, I know Alex. He would never be a frogman. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, these people develop such intense, romantic interest so fast in this family. Like, chill out and be like, yo, who should I listen to here? All of my family or Cal, or all of my family, or a man who may be a frog is like a weird dichotomy to like try to pick from here.
And doesn't, I mean, like everything he does betrays that he's a frogman. Doesn't he even as he's flirting with her, doesn't he even say your eyes are beautiful? They're like lily pads in a pond or whatever. It's like, if you think back about that for 1 second after your kids have introduced the idea that maybe he's a frogman, you'd be like, you know, he did say some very frogman kind of things. Yeah, you guys are probably right.
Just 2-gallon jugs of just like green shit. Like I love green. It's my favorite color. I'm obsessed with it. Yeah. Right? It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
It's just and again, like as soon I think it was probably like the lily pad line where it's like, this guy's gonna turn out to be a frog. That's gonna be what explains like it. But I thought it was gonna be like almost a reverse Cinderella kind of thing or whatever. Like, oh, Cal has like cast this spell on him. He's going to turn into a frog. And hey, it turns out he's actually a nice guy. So like maybe the mom's going to kiss him at the end of the night and he's going to like turn back into a real person. Nope. That's not the way they went with this. Nope. So, oh well. Yeah. Man, this was a movie and
yeah,
I have no idea what I would have thought about this if I'd watched it in 2001. I was already, you know, a angry, jaded 16-year-old, like old man in a 16-year-old's body at that point. So I can't imagine I would have probably responded too much more kindly to it, but maybe, or like maybe if I'd seen it like with friends at like like, hey, we're gonna go hang out at a friend's house and just like watch this, like we probably would have had a fun time. But watching it now, yeah, it was rough chuckles for me.
Yeah,
But I mean, it did have a couple highlights there. Gort, very fun.
Gord's great.
And a couple other bits there. But any last thoughts before we move on to grading? All right.
Let's give them grades.
So let's give this thing a grade from A+ to F. I will go ahead and just kind of like kick this off. This gets a D from me. Not even a D+. This was just like oh man, this was a rough time. Very couple like little, okay, you got me with that little bit here, but for the most part I was just like, man, Disney Channel original movies do not hold up if you don't have the nostalgia for them sometimes, and this was one of those times for me. Frank, hit me with your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the same page as you because I definitely enjoyed this movie a lot more when I was younger, and I definitely remember enjoying it at least. In this one, I didn't dislike it as much as you necessarily, but I definitely was like, oh yeah, this is not it. Like this ain't it. But there's a couple things I like
no
about
Eddie's
it.
$1 Million Cook-Off.
Yeah, that movie's still a banger. That movie's great.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Never been a banger.
No, it's not, Frank.
It's a great movie.
If you want to hear more of our thoughts on Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off, go back and listen to like episode 3 of this podcast. I think one of our very early ones.
And it's a great episode. But yeah, that's why I do love that one. And then this one definitely just didn't hold up for me the same way. And so I think I go like D+.
All right, Logan, the biggest Halloweentown fan on the panel, hit us with your grade.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think there's an element of like grading on a curve for Disney Channel original movies. There's an element of, nostalgia at play. I mean, like I think the movie's flawed. I mean, we spent more time talking about its flaws and its, I think, successes. I still, am someone who is partial to the James Bond metric of reviewing things, which is it's better to be a great movie, but if you must not be a great movie, it's better to be fun and
it's
bad.
Better to fail spectacularly.
Yeah, it's better to be fun and bad than just boring, right? And like this movie sort of threads both the needles, right? Like there are elements of it that I think are fun, and then there are elements of it that I think are just really not. I think watching them one after the other in terms of like last year to this year, it is, I don't know if Halloweentown 2 is the darkest movie in the trilogy or whatever, but I do think it is the least colorful. I do think it is the least kind of bright and exciting and things are happening. And part of that is by design because it's literally they're fighting the enemy of gray. But I think you feel that absence of color, right? And like I think that's what makes Halloweentown 1 so fun, right? Like I'm the guy who loves the weird alien parts of Star Wars, and I love the weirdness of Halloweentown. That like it sort of works, right? And I think here it doesn't. And I mean, like that's all relevant here, but like I don't think the movie's bad, right? Like I think the movie's fine. I think the movie's, I would give it like a C-, right? Like I think it threads that needle between like a D and a C. But like ultimately, I can watch a movie again. I will watch a movie again at some point in my life, I'm sure. And so like I'd give it a C- before I'd give it a D+, I think.
All right, that's fair enough.
The D's are coming and worse on this series. It has just not happened yet.
Fair. I also want to give a shout out because I was reminded of this. So like just random happenstance. The day I watched it, because I watched it during my like week between jobs, like in the middle of the day. And one of my friends from college like tweeted about like BRB gonna go watch Halloweentown, like the original Halloweentown, and I was like, hey, like I literally just watched the sequel, and then he was like, maybe I'll make it I'll double header, and I was like, oh, I would not do that. Never heard back from him to hear if he actually did or not, but I hope he did not, for his sake. But yeah, Logan also saw that exchange and was like, boo,
I did.
Boo. Yeah. Anyway, so that is Halloweentown 2, Kalabar's Revenge. Again, completely lacking in Kalabar. But
Yeah.
oh well. Extra credit, other suggestions. If you did like this one, you have Halloweentown High to look forward to. You can also, if you somehow jumped into this one first, the second recommendation that Disney Plus has is, hey, go back and watch the original Halloweentown.
It's really good.
Then you have Return to Halloweentown.
Don't watch it.
You have
Don't watch it.
Twitches, which is
Watch it.
the Tia and
Yeah.
Tamara Mowry as twin
Yeah.
witches.
I really like that one too, or at least I did when I was a kid. Like that was another Halloween. Like, yeah, this is great. But
That was
there.
like that's like one of the last Disney Channel movies I've probably ever seen is Twitches.
Maybe we'll have to do that next Halloween. You have Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, which
Love
that
it.
definitely had, like the mom and frog guy like was definitely like very early on. I was like, is this going to be another Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire? Like, there's something going on with this guy. What is it? And then turns out he's a frog guy. But yes, we've done an episode of that D Plus show on that one. If you'd like
I love that movie.
to go back and check that out, you can do that as well. The Scream Team, Can of Worms, and then another one we've done an episode on, Phantom of the Megaplex.
Yeah, one of my favorites as well.
Yeah,
It's a good lineup.
Obviously, a very Disney Channel original movie, Halloween themed lineup here, because that was a well they went to quite often in those days. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? We're in between Marvel shows at the moment, so probably a little bit lighter. What Book of Boba Fett's going to come out at the very tail end of the year. We got Hawkeye in a month or so.
Also, Shang-Chi is going to come out on November 12th, so I'm actually like really excited to rewatch that.
There you go. Yep.
Never saw it.
Well, you can watch it on Disney Plus.
I will.
November
Very
12th
excited.
on Disney Plus Day. Basically, hey, everybody, renew your subscriptions, please. Cool. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me to talk about Halloweentown II, Kalabar's Revenge. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
I will give a shout out to the third episode of Trevor Starkey's Let's Play through Life is Strange Before the Storm that went live on at some point in time when you're listening to this. I think
a
last
week and a half ago, basically. Yeah, because we're recording these a little bit out of order. But yes, that did just go live today.
Go check out the entire 4-part series that Trevor Starkey will have finished by this point in time on YouTube. Life is Strange Before the Storm is a weird game, and I have a weird relationship to it. But Trevor really seemed to like it, at least at parts, and so go check out all that. I'm here for all things Life is Strange.
Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Frank?
Yeah, I definitely second that Logan shout out there because I watched the first 2 episodes and I was watching you clean out a locker and do some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Also you put an anarchy sign on a like a stadium light, and I was like, yeah, I support this.
There we go. Shout out to you for actually watching the videos, because I've definitely had Cameron like plug videos that I've done, and I've gone and looked and there are 0 views on the video. So I'm like, thank you for giving the shout out and pretending like you watched that Let's Play, Cameron, but I know you did not. But yes, Frank actually calling out things I definitely did in Life is Strange Before the Storm. Much love. Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will just encourage you to check out any of the That D Plus shows we did this month for Halloween. If you have not been keeping up, we had a fun little flurry of shows. We still have not yet in our timeline recorded, but we will be doing a Treehouse of Horrors episode for The Simpsons,
Very excited
which
about that.
should theoretically have been last week's episode of this podcast. So you can go check that out as well, because I'm sure that'll be a banger. Definitely has some. It's basically the first 3 Treehouse of Horror episodes. Definitely doesn't have like the most iconic segment that I remember yet. I think that comes in maybe 4 or 5, but definitely has some early standouts in what that series would become. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.